Hello, I'm William Michael of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, and today I received an email from a homeschooling mother that I'd like to respond to because she asks an important question, and I'd like to provide a helpful, detailed answer to what I consider to be a really important question. This mother wrote and said that her and her husband, they're a traditional Catholic family, and they got started with Seton homeschool because they didn't know what to do. So they just sort of got started with what seemed to be the simplest homeschool curriculum. And I'd agree that Seton, if you have no idea what you're doing and you've come out of a modern school education yourself, it's probably best to start with Seton because classical education is just a different ballgame, and it takes time to even learn the basics of homeschooling before you can even attempt to pursue classical Catholic studies. But this mother wrote that they got started in Seton, and yet over time, now that they sort of get themselves established as a homeschooling family, they start to realize that more is needed, more is possible. Obviously, none of the saints studied the Seton curriculum. Obviously, none of the saints had a K-12 education. And so if you just start to connect the dots, you realize that, I'm really not doing what I would like to do. I would really like to give my children the same kind of education that wise men and saints enjoyed through history, and it's not Seton workbook curriculum. And you'll realize that, hopefully, if you're paying attention, if you're studying the lives of the saints, if you're learning church history, you'll quickly realize that what a program like Seton is doing is not offering the education of wise men and saints. It's simply Catholicizing a modern public school education. So when you come to you come to your senses about Catholic education and you start to research, you'll start running into my stuff. If you search classical Catholic studies, classical Catholic education, classical Catholic homeschooling, you'll start running into my articles and videos and Classical Liberal Arts Academy content and things like that. And then you start watching my videos, poking around the Academy website, and you realize this is very different, and I have no idea what I'm doing. And that's a good place to be because we just have to learn. It's us overcoming the failures of previous generations and making a change. I like to think of it as making a turn in our family history and directing the future of our families in a better direction. So that humility to be able to realize, like Socrates did, I don't know what I'm doing, I don't know anything, is the beginning of the opportunity for us to actually learn what we need to do. And I may not be in that place today, but I was in that place when I was 19 years old when I realized as a Christian that what I'm doing makes no sense. It's not what the saints did. It's not what the men that I admire did. I want to do what they did. And for me, that started when I was 19 and I began my research, which today I'm 47, turning 48 this month. I've been at this for, it's hard for me to realize this, but I've been at this for almost 30 years now. So I'm further along the road than you are for certain, but you're in a good place if you're asking these questions. And what this mother wanted to know, what her question led to was, we would like for our children to pursue a classical Catholic education, and yet when we come to the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, it looks like everything is online, and we really don't want our kids online. And, my response to that, to all Catholics, is no duh, right? None of us want our kids online. None of us want our kids online. But we have to be realistic about this. I also don't want my kids in the supermarket. I also don't want my kids at the mall. I also don't want my kids walking down Main Street or driving down the highway with all kinds of craziness all over the place. I want my kids to be in heaven. But this life is what it is. And so the first thing I would say is you've got to be willing to find balance, because to have ideals in this generation is simply not responsible. To say, we've got this system of life, or this philosophy of life that we've written down on paper. Well, that's very nice, but the problem is we've got to live our Christian life on the ground in this world at the present time. And so we've got to find ways to pursue those ideals to the greatest degree possible, while also working within the restraints of the reality of our circumstances in God's providence. And we have to realize that these restraints that we have to deal with, these obstacles we have to deal with, there's a couple of different ways of dealing with them. First of all, it's just to avoid them, which is what most Christian people do. They just avoid it. They just, put their head in the sand and pretend they can ignore the obstacles and leave it for someone else to figure out. That's usually, in modern times, that's the default Christian reaction to any sort of practical, logistical, political, material obstacles that stand in the way of their ideals. They just choose to change their ideals, to make them superficial, to water them down, and just pretend to basically, pretend that what you're doing is what needs to be done. And I don't want to do that. I don't want to pretend. I don't want to create, like we see, I don't want to create a fake classical education movement and then just pretend with my kids that we're doing stuff that we're not actually doing. I don't want to do that. I want to pursue real classical Catholic education. So I can't just bury my head in the sand and, turn off the highway anytime that there's some difficulty. I've got to keep going. We've got to keep moving forward and figure out what these obstacles are and remove them. That's the real work that we have as Catholics, not just for our own kids. Don't be selfish and just think this is about your kids. This is a bigger Christian challenge that we face, that we've got to embrace and stop ducking away from. So there are real obstacles, and these obstacles currently limit what we can do realistically. And so we've got to work to overcome these obstacles, not just hide on them. And we've got to realize that in the long run, that's really what our work is. It goes beyond just teaching our own children. It goes beyond that. We're going to have grandchildren. There's another generation coming and another generation after that. And as Catholic adults, we have to take consideration, not just for our own children, but for all Catholic people to come 3 generations from now, and try to leave them opportunities that we ourselves didn't have because past generations were negligent and irresponsible. So we've got to think about what we can do to improve these things and eliminate these obstacles that currently affect us, and do that for the next generation. So what most Christians do, like I said, is they just duck the trouble. They sort of hide away, and they settle for superficial or even counterfeit copies of the real thing that they avoid. When we look at the saints and we look at their lives, we look at the struggles they endured, we look at the great trials they undertook, what we see is that they were doing this work that we need to do in their generation. John Bosco was doing this work in his generation. Padre Pio was doing this work in his generation. The Jesuits in the 16th century were doing this work in their generation. St. Thomas Aquinas was doing this work in his generation, and so on. This is what the saints were doing. They were doing this work of identifying the problems and working to eliminate them, and that opened up opportunities for the generations that followed them. Well, generations since have neglected these things and have left us with a real mess, and we can either fake it and pretend that we're like saints and just ignore the problems, or we can roll up our sleeves and devote our lives to removing these obstacles for the next generation of Catholics. So when we talk about using the internet, working offline, studying with books and so on, we're not free to make that decision. We're not free to make that decision and just say, oh, we're not using the internet. I'm just going to spite myself and spite my children, and we're just going to accept whatever happens to be in print, because you're going to learn there is junk in print. That's just the reality, and there's a reason for that. Back in the 1850s, when the public school movement developed, the public schools were established with government funding. The publishing companies realized that all the money was going to be made by serving and supplying the public schools with their books. And so almost all publishing companies for school materials focused entirely on publishing to serve the modern school curriculum. And that continues to be true today. Even if you look at other school programs, other homeschool publishers, book catalogs and things like that, they're all published for the K-12 modern school curriculum. And they just continue to do that and continue to do that because that's where the money is. It's just a lazy, irresponsible way to try to make money by serving the existing system rather than fixing the system, because fixing the system requires heroic labor to actually go back, solve the problem, and produce all of the stuff that's necessary to actually solve those problems. And these programs and groups and schools, they're not actually interested in that work. They're just interested in serving the status quo and trying to skim some money off the educational business as things are. And yeah, they try to make things look different. They'll put, old-fashioned covers or put pictures of saints on books, but it's the same stuff just being dressed up irrationally because the saints on those books didn't study books like those. And we've got to be honest as Catholics and realize we've got real trouble to deal with. We've got real problems to fight against and overcome. And we can't just be lazy and, to put it frankly, to be stupid and kid ourselves that putting Christian covers on what are substantially secular, materialistic books is not responsibly dealing with the problem. So if you're going to say, nope, we're only using printed books, then you're not going to give your kids a classical Catholic education because the books don't exist. It's just that simple. The printed materials in 2023, they do not exist. You will not be able to give your children a classical Catholic education, an education like that which was enjoyed by wise men and saints through history. You will not be able to give your children that education through books alone, period. And there's no way around that. And so what we've got to do is work together to find the best possible solution for the present while also working as Catholic adults to create better opportunities for the future. That's the responsible solution to this situation. We've got our own children, and we need to give them the best we can right now based on what's possible. We didn't choose these situations. We didn't choose these circumstances. We were born into them, and we've got to deal with them realistically and responsibly. We want to give our children the best possible education that we can right now. But at the same time, we've got grandchildren to think about. We've got future generations of Catholic kids to think about. And we can't just settle for what works right now. We've got to look ahead and work to provide a solution to remove these obstacles for the next generation. That's simply living according to the golden rule. We've got to do for others what we would want someone to do for us. And when we consider the circumstances into which we've been born in this generation, where previous generations have just, been hands off and have just kind of followed the secular schools and institutions wherever they go, we're left in a hole that's very deep, and it's going to be very difficult for us to get out of. But we've got to fight to try to get out of it if we can. So if you're going to develop and maintain some kind of just, spiteful all or nothing policy, you're going to be miserable, and it's not going to work. You're going to end up settling for some program like Seton, which just follows secular education. You're going to settle for some fake classical education program that just makes stuff up, that has nothing to do with education of wise men and saints, and is just publishing boxes and boxes and catalogs full of junk and calling it classical for families that are just really pretending that they're doing something that they're not actually doing. You can go that route, and most Christians do go that route. But if you really want to address these problems, we've got to deal with them at two different levels. First, What can we do for the present to give our kids the best possible Catholic education right now with what's available and realistic for us? And secondly, what we can do to improve the future, because, even in homeschooling, you're going to have one child who's born first, and his homeschool experience is going to be very different than your last child. My oldest is 23 years old. What was available to him when he was 8 is completely different than what's available to my kids now, who are 8 and 9 at home. So even if you think of your kids and sort of the historical, future of your homeschooling years, you've got to deal with what's possible right now, because this oldest kid doesn't get a second education. This is his only education. You've got to give him the best opportunity possible, but at the same time, you've got 5, 10, maybe even 15 years to get ready for the youngest children to come along in a completely different environment. And, that's how we have to think about things. You're also going to be a grandparent one day, and what you do with your children and the opportunity you have is going to affect what they can do in 25, 30 years from now. So I just ask Catholic parents to not be, short-sighted and selfish and lazy, and focus on getting through right now with, satisfying the minimum requirements right now. But really, understand we've got present work to do, but we also have future responsibilities. And I beg Catholic families to commit with us to developing these long-term solutions, because we are doing it. We can do it. It just takes a long-term commitment to actually think beyond ourselves and our immediate concerns and realize that we're part of a bigger picture and a long-term solution. So don't spite yourself. Don't fake it. Don't settle for some easy, lazy option. You can give your kids a real classical Catholic education, the same education saints in the best periods of Christian history enjoyed. It just takes some willingness to learn how to do things. It takes some patience to learn how to manage things. It takes some juggling of methods and resources that you may not really want to use, but need to use and need to learn to use in creative ways. So I'd like to talk about the practical details a little bit and encourage you to pursue it, but to realize you've got to pursue it realistically, or you're just going to end up doing nonsense. So let's talk about realistically. Now, like I said, I've been working at restoring classical Catholic education now, between studying and teaching and actually working with the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. I've been at this for 25 years, almost 30 years. And we have made so much progress, and yet there's still a lot to do, but we're really getting close to some major breakthroughs. And so let me explain what's going on in the Academy. First of all, I had to choose to leave a teaching career to do this work back in 2008, and I had to sacrifice everything as a father with, I had at least 5 children at the time, and I knew that as a matter of principle, because I felt like I still had time, my kids were still young enough that I had time to get something done for them. I was confident that I could find a way to earn a living through tutoring locally, because I had lots of contacts locally, and I believed that I could get this program started and work towards it. There was no way to publish anything in print. There was no way. All the work that needed to be, there was so much work that needed to be done. The only possible way that I could make the work available to anyone was to use the internet. It was the only possible way. We had students all over the world from the beginning. Right now there's over 90 courses on the Academy website. There was so much work to be done, so much material to be shared with so many people in so many different places, that the only possible way to get the work even started and operate it in a sustainable, responsible way was to do it online. And so since 2008, we've worked to use the internet to be the place where we post all the resources, do the research, share the information, share the study materials, provide the assessments, provide the support, keep records, all of these different tasks that are necessary. We've been able to do all of this online, real time, while people use it, using it while we're developing it. And yeah, there's a million, sources of frustration and stuff involved in that, but it was the only way that it could be done. And it has been self-funded from day one. So that's been almost 15 years now, since 2008. So the internet has allowed us to do this work. It's allowed my wife and I, for example, to work full-time for 15 years as Catholic classicists, to work to restore this, to develop online courses, make assessments available, give support and tutoring services to students presently studying, and so on. It's been the only way to do it. Now, you can imagine that the internet presents 1,001 different distractions and temptations and challenges for families. And that was a necessary evil that we had to embrace. We had to embrace that as a necessary evil in order for us to move forward and make this possible. It was going to be extremely difficult because we had to deal with this challenge of dealing with the internet. And to be perfectly honest, I think it's exaggerated. I think it's exaggerated. Most of the time, when kids get into trouble online, it's because they're not supervised by their parents, which has nothing to do with the internet, and it's because those kids simply have disordered desires that need to be dealt with. They're revealing problems and weaknesses of their own character, and it gives parents an opportunity to see those things and deal with them, rather than just have them hidden or unknown and feel good about things, but really have problems beneath the surface. So I think that the trouble of the internet is grossly exaggerated. I think some people had experiences on the internet back in 1995, in early days of the internet, where there were a lot of security problems. There was a lot of immorality, in the sense that the search engines weren't very well controlled and things like that, and you could easily slip into bad things by a completely innocent search on Google. That stuff is really not true anymore. If you go onto Google and search for things, sorry, there's a fly in my face here. If you go on Google and search around for things, you'll see that Google is doing everything they can to protect everyone using the internet. You've got to click and click and click and seek and seek and seek to get to bad content on the internet. That's just a fact. You've got to literally search for it, and then you've got to go through the search results and seek it. And so I really don't think it's fair to blame that problem on the internet, because the people managing the internet, they're doing what they can do to make it safe for kids to use. Many kids are simply perverted and disobedient, and they get into these troubles by their own sins. And so I like to speak on behalf of the internet to say it's not as bad as people pretend it is. Most of the time, it's unsupervised kids being left for hours and hours and hours to just click and click and click and go down these rabbit trails, these funnels into all kinds of dark places, which they shouldn't even have the time to do in the first place. And it's just kids who are bad, who are going to be bad offline too. So the internet gets a lot of criticism that's really not just, not honest and accurate. But anyway, nevertheless, in an ideal world, we wouldn't have to deal with that, but we don't live in an ideal world. And so presently, and for the past 15 years, we have had to deal with that. And it's a reality that those who are not self-controlled, the parents who don't want to supervise kids, they may not be able to use it, and that's the fault of their own either negligence or weakness, and there's been nothing we can do about that. I've worked online 18 hours a day for 25 years, and I just find this criticism of the internet to be baloney. It's not true. All the work that I do is being done through the internet. So we've had to deal with that as a necessary tool to use in order to get this established. Having said that, it's our goal, long term to make more and more and more available offline. And the reason why is not because the internet is immoral and things like that. The reason why I believe it's prudent for us to make things available offline is because these systems of electricity and, internet technology, satellite, wireless networking, these things are very fragile. These things are very fragile. And to be honest, we can lose them at any time. We can lose them by natural disaster. We can lose them by war. If there's any kind of military interruption of these things, we can't guarantee that these fragile networks and these fragile resources that we have will always be available. We've enjoyed them in a time of extraordinary peace in American society and throughout much of the world. But those days may be numbered, and we see all kinds of threats of wars and rumors of wars. So we really don't know if we're going to have the leisure and privilege of studying online. So it's wise for us, I think, to prepare for a time when we may need to educate our kids without access to the internet. So that's more of my concern than the immorality of the internet. So if you look at our website, you'll see, like I said, there's over 90 courses being developing that kids have been studying for 15 years. And for many kids, it's made these studies a possibility. And apart from the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, apart from our online courses, they would not have been a possibility. And so that's good. And that's the way I look at the online program. At the same time, like I said, the ideal is to get this stuff offline, and that's going to take time for a number of reasons. Number one, no one wants to print this stuff. There's no publisher that's interested in printing classical Catholic study materials. They're looking for big products that sell to the biggest audiences, and those products, if you study marketing, in order to sell to the largest possible audiences, you need to produce vanilla. That's what you need to produce. You need to produce boring, bland, generic stuff that serves the largest possible audience. That's what publishers are looking for. So this stuff isn't going to get the support of publishing companies looking to get into classical Catholic education. We're going to have to publish this ourselves. So the first thing is we've got to get all the materials established, all the source texts restored and things like that, and then we are going to have to publish it ourselves on a small scale for our own use, and we're already doing that. If you go on the Academy website, you can go to the online catalog to the bookstore, and you'll see that this work is in progress. We're working to get these things into print, so it's coming. It's just a matter of time. Again, when my kids were younger, there was nothing in print. Now, that's not the case. I've got right here, I've got a copy of the Latin Vulgate that we just published. This big, huge thing, looks like a phone book. But we've got books being prepared and published, but these things just take time. It's just a matter of time. So if you're not patient, if you're not willing to commit to a long-term project, not only for your own immediate needs, but also as a Christian apostolate for future needs, well, then there's no answer. There's no real classical Catholic education available right now in print that you can just go buy. The consumer culture, it's diluting because people think that if they have enough money, they could just buy anything they need, and it's not true. The stuff is not available in print. You can't just throw money someplace and get it. It doesn't exist. But we're working on that. It takes time to do these things. Now, as for the present, can you have your children in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy and study offline? Yes, you can. You can. It takes some managing and some effort from the parents, which usually is the limiting factor, because when we really get down to it, the parents aren't willing to do the work that's necessary. But you can. And I can give you an example from my own family. I'm an online guy. I like using the internet. I like studying online. I use digital texts. I study from PDFs. I work and type and make videos and talk. I use modern media, and I always have. I started when I was in college using digital media. My entire academic career has been digital, and I consider that the best way to do it, the most productive way to do it, and so on. And I would encourage it for anyone who's able to do it responsibly, learning how to study using modern tools while we've got them is the most efficient way to progress in classical Catholic studies. That's my view, and that's been my practice. Now, my wife is a completely different person than me. My wife doesn't like online studies. She doesn't like the kids on computers. She doesn't want to have to supervise the kids clicking around on things all day long. She would like the kids to study offline, on paper, from books, at their desks, and so on. So we represent two very different camps on these issues, and that's been helpful for our development, because I would run in one direction and my wife would want to go in another direction, and we always worked to satisfy both. So let me explain, and I'm talking about present solutions. Let me explain how you can study offline using the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. Now, all of our content is online. You as a parent obviously aren't opposed to being online, or you wouldn't be watching this video right now. So it's almost as if there needs to be someone who works online on behalf of the family, sort of a family representative who does the online stuff. Or maybe the kids go online to take a quiz or submit an assignment, and all their studies are done offline. That all can work in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. So you can arrange it so that you either buy printed books as they become available, or you print lessons off the website because they're formatted and available for printing. You can print whatever you need. You can do those things. So you can prepare for printed studies for your children to work offline. They can do their assignments by hand on notebook paper like it's 1980. That's fine. They can do that. But then the question comes to assessment, grading, record keeping, and so on. And for you to have us help you with those things, there's going to need to be some communication. As far as assignments go, you can have a kid do work on paper, by hand, just like I said, like we're in school in 1980. That's totally fine. They can do their work on paper by hand, and you can just take a smartphone, get an app called Adobe Scan, and the Adobe Scan app, you simply scan the student's paper, the app converts it into a PDF document, and you simply email it to us. That's the easiest way to do it. Nobody has to be online. You've probably got a phone anyway. Use it for something good. Use it to submit the kids' schoolwork. You can email PDF copies of their handwritten work, and we'll grade it and mark their online assignments complete. So it can be done. It takes some collaboration between us, but it can be done. Adobe Scan app is the way to do that. Simply scan their paper with your phone camera. It converts it into a PDF document, and you simply email that and submit it for the student's work, and we can take it from there. Online tests and quizzes. The online quizzes we have, they usually take kids 10 minutes at the most. So you can have a computer or two set up in the house that the kids are allowed to use for testing. They can sit down, take a test, get their grade, and get off the computer. Can it work like that? Absolutely, it can work like that. Can kids sit at the computer just to submit their work? Absolutely, they can submit their work by just sitting down and working for a short period of time. All of their study, reading, note-taking, answering questions, all of that stuff, that can all be done offline. But it takes some work on the part of the parent. And if you're going to be lazy about it and just look for some boxed solution that you can throw money at, you're not going to have it. That the solution doesn't exist. Now, I would advise a family, and see, here's where we get into more problems. I would advise a family to subscribe to our premium student plan enrollment if they wanted to do things like that, because that would give us the opportunity to provide more time and support for your family for those kinds of arrangements. We could even help with them to a degree. We could do that through the premium subscription, but we're not going to be able to do that if you're paying $25 a month for a student. There's no time being provided for financially for assistance from us to help you with that. So what we'll normally get is the parents who come in looking for the most help are also the ones looking to pay the least. And so, they're just not realistic. It's just not how life works. You don't get better service when you choose lower subscription plans in any area of life. And yet, when it comes to Catholic education, Catholics think that that's going to be possible, and it's simply not realistic. We'd be willing to help more, but there's only so many hours in a day, and we're obligated to other students as well. So if your family needs more attention and more service and more collaboration from us, then the reasonable thing is for you to subscribe to a premium subscription where you actually make it possible for us to do that and to help. And not just to help you with things as they are, but to also continue to develop those tools and resources so you can study like that and make it easier for you. So, you can see that there are a lot of issues, and even as I say this, if you start to bristle at the thought of paying more, well, that's the problem. That's the way modern Christians just don't take these things seriously. When we look back in the past and we see beautiful cathedrals that people built, they didn't build those things because they were trying to save money. They built those things because they were putting their money into the projects that they believed in and wanted to build and do to fulfill their stated religious ideals and goals. And Christians today don't do that. They imagine that Christian workers should make things available for them for free, and their desire to do them is their virtue. And that's just not realistic. That's not saintly living. So there's got to be a collaboration between us. Parents have to take their role seriously. These things cost time and money. Your family is not self-sufficient. We're social animals. We have to work together. That's what makes quality of life possible. When we combine our different skills and resources, we provide our skill, we provide our experience, you support our work, and those things come together, and we collaborate together, and we accomplish great things. We have to be responsible about these things. We have to stop this like dopey modern Christianity where no one's going to make any money or invest in any Christian apostolates, and yet there's going to be this amazing medieval, beautiful work. It's not realistic. It's childish, really. And these are the kinds of things that this work depends on. We have families that come in, they have high goals, high standards, they learn what needs to be done, they put their money on the table, they roll up their sleeves, and they work with us for 10, 15 years. And we provide their kids with a great education. We've got other people who show up looking for everything for free, demanding more than everybody else, and they walk away with nothing. And it's just that simple. Can it be done? Absolutely. But there needs to be a responsible adult collaboration between us to make it possible in this generation, because you are not living in a generation rich in Catholic educational resources and services. And you've got to be willing to be part of the solution to that problem, because if you come in like a consumer, we just don't care. Your money is not impressive to us. There's nothing for you to throw money at here. All of this work is in process. I have no idea when this work is going to be done, and I focus on doing it with quality, seeking to fulfill the real objectives. And I trust that the Lord will continue to provide for it through people who share our mission, share our values, and are also willing to collaborate with us, to put money on the table, to pay for services they need, to provide for things to get developed. There are many families that pay for the premium subscription and donate more in addition to that, unasked, as a part of collaborating with us. So can it be done? Yes, it can be done. Right now, in 2023, you can give your kids a great classical Catholic education, but it's going to require patience and collaboration. And if you say, well, we just don't have the money, that's fine. You then have to have the patience. You have to then be willing to do some extra work, take some some longer routes to get things done, work more patiently. We understand that. We've had our times of financial trouble. We know how things are. But we also had to learn to work through those times, knowing we didn't have resources and finding other ways to get things done. If you're willing to work like that, you can do it. If you're not willing to work like that, you're going to come in like a Walmart shopper looking to get more for less, you might as well not come in, because it just doesn't exist today. And that's why you've got these programs like Seton and the fake classical programs. They'll take your money, they'll send you a box of books. You can all stand in a circle and tell each other that you're doing something that you're not doing, but the reality is the work remains undone. I just ask Catholic parents to join us in this work. Put their 5 loaves and 2 fish on the table, and let's see what we can make out of this by working together. If you don't have money, then bring patience. If you don't have money, then bring time and bring labor. There's things that we have to contribute to work together to get this done. It will get done. It's just if you're going to participate in it and benefit from it, you've got to be mature. You've got to come into this with a realistic expectation of what's possible in this wacko generation we live in, where there's almost nothing left for us in terms of Catholic institutions, for raising children, education, family culture. We've got to work to make these things available, and it takes time and effort and sacrifice and money and all that. And if you're willing to collaborate with us, you'll find that there's no limit to what you can provide for your children. It just takes communication. It takes the willingness to, go 2 miles rather than 1. There's just sacrifices and compromises practically that we have to make to get these things done. And if you're willing to do those things, yeah, you can do it. If you're not willing to do it, then don't waste your time, because it's simply not available, and you should know better. So that's what I wanted to share. I hope that's helpful. I want to talk frankly because, I can give you a sales pitch and I can get people signed up, but I'm too experienced in this to think that people coming in with crazy ideas of what they're going to do, talk up to the heavens, with no realistic ability to commit or work or invest in the help that they need. There's no way. It's not going to work. And I'd like to just be honest up front and tell you what you'll need to do to succeed, and whether you should not even bother getting started if your expectations are just immature and unrealistic. So can it be done? Can you give your children a classical Catholic education largely offline? Absolutely. Absolutely. No problem. And it's going to get easier as we go, because more and more of that work is getting done. But to get started, when you come in, you've got to commit to the mission of the Academy and what we're trying to accomplish. You've got to see yourself as part of the solution long term, and don't think to come in here as a consumer, because there's nothing to buy yet. That consumer attitude, go to Walmart, go to Seton, go to the homeschool conference. That's where that spirit gets served. Real classical Catholic education, there's nothing to buy in 2023. There's too much work to do. So I hope that's helpful. I'm sure that you can appreciate it being honest. If you'd like to talk about it and get into the details and learn how you can manage it and give your kids a classical Catholic education, just get in touch. We're here to talk about it. My wife, who's a homeschooling mother, she's usually the contact person on the website that homeschool mothers connect with and talk to, and she's a wealth of practical information for how to do it, because like I said, she prefers being offline. She's homeschooled 10 children. She's a classicist herself, experienced elementary school teacher, on and on and on. So she's a great resource for homeschool mothers. If you want to get into the philosophical side of things and the bigger questions, you can pick my brain and get in touch with me about those things. Watch the talks that I publish and stuff like that. But you've got to commit as a member of this community that's working to help produce the solution to these problems, not come in here like a consumer looking for something to buy off a shelf. That's not how this works. It's not this generation. And it's not a responsible plan for a Catholic person living in this generation, just as irresponsible as it would have been for, Thomas Aquinas to look for a good classical Catholic university when he needed to establish that university. It wasn't for him to go buy the education that he himself was called to establish. It's like John Bosco looking for a place that he could send boys rather than realizing that he was the one who needed to create that place where the boys could be sent. That's our generation. We're the ones who have to solve this problem, not think that we can just send our money someplace because it's been solved someplace else. It's not solved anyplace else. But if you want to find a place that's the furthest along in solving it, it's the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. And if you're willing to commit to working with us and actually rolling up your sleeves, putting some money on the table, and working realistically and patiently, we can do it. So I hope that's helpful. If more questions come up, you'd like to get into this in more detail, just get in touch. I hope that's helpful. God bless.